When we talk about history, we normally limit our scopes to history-changing leaders, great battles, building projects, what areas of land a particular empire ruled at one time, and maybe to a lesser extent things like philosophy or mythology, but too rarely, I feel, do we talk about the day-to-day lives of the people living in these ancient civilizations. To be fair, most of the stuff that got written down in ancient history was about the big important things, but that doesn't mean we can't look through the historical record to learn about some of the now extinct cultures that once contributed to the tapestry of humanity. So what were the day-to-day cultures of Sumer or the Minoans or any other ancient peoples like? Now, of course, I could easily start with some of the more well-known cultures of antiquity, like Egypt or Rome, but as we have a lot more information on them, and they're famous enough for people to click on a video with their names in the title, I'm actually going to save them for their own potential future videos and focus on some slightly more obscure cultures. Though do subscribe for those potential future videos. Starting at the beginning, like of human civilization, let's talk about Sumer. Just as a primer, the area we today call Mesopotamia has played host to several different cultures throughout its millennia-long history, from the Sumerians to the Akkadians to the still existent Assyrians, to Greeks and Persians from the outside, but Sumer was the one that started it all. The Sumerians lived at the dawn of civilization, around the area the Tigris and the Euphrates rivers meet, building cities like Ur, Uruk, Larsa, Lagash, Eridu, and Nippur. The interesting thing about the Sumerians, though, is just how different they were from all their neighbors. Whereas the other peoples of the area might have spoken an Afro-Asiatic or an Indo-European language, Sumerian doesn't seem to be related to any other known languages, something linguists call a language isolate. With the language dying out in daily use by 1700 BC, much of what we know about Sumer actually comes from the Akkadians, who used Sumerian as a prestige language long after it died out in everyday usage, kind of like post-Roman Europe with Latin, copying old Sumerian records as writing aids to help students learn to write cuneiform until as recently as the year 100. But before I start just summarizing the civilization, we have to answer what exactly is a culture, and how do you talk about one in under 500 words so you can mention 2 other cultures? My friend JJ McCullough has a lot of videos talking about culture in this sort of way, in a couple of which he uses this chart of 11 admittedly arbitrary measures of language, medical ideals, religion, methods of raising children, food, folk art, celebrations, jokes, manners, clothing, and working schedules. Obviously, we don't have records on all of these things for cultures that have been extinct for thousands of years, and I'm not going to follow this list exactly, but I still think it's a good reference because it focuses not just on the material, holidays, cuisine, music, literature, and all the like, but also the immaterial, unspoken rules of a culture, like concepts of time, theories of medicine, attitudes towards self and family, or what it even means to show respect to someone in the first place. One of the most famous pieces of visual art from Sumer is the Standard of Ur, which actually has 2 different panels, one for peacetime and the other for war. While the war panel shows soldiers and chariots charging into battles, trampling enemies underfoot, the kinds of stuff you don't generally come to this channel for, the peace panel shows banquet scenes with the king shown larger than everyone else, different blue-collar occupations, and even a glimpse into Sumerian music, or at least the fact that they had lyres. Unsurprisingly, the Sumerian religion played a big role in earthly affairs. The Sumerians worshipped a pantheon of gods, though the exact list of gods would have varied from city-state to city-state. This religious influence was particularly true for medicine, as a doctor's job was more about being a conduit for the gods and their healing powers. One notable Sumerian holiday, or at least a holiday with a Sumerian name, was Zagmuk, a New Year's festival held in March or April, which was later celebrated by the Babylonians to commemorate their god Marduk, and is actually still celebrated to this day in Assyrian communities under the name Akitu. As far as jokes go, the internet is already quite familiar with this one joke that goes something like, a dog walks into a tavern and says, "I can't see a thing. I'll open this one." It went viral a while back for how little sense it makes to our modern senses 4,000 years later, and everyone from experts to experts are constantly arguing what the point of the punchline actually is. Is it because the tavern is also a brothel? Is it because the dog isn't a tavern at all, or even speaking? If you want a deeper look into this long misunderstood joke, The Histocrat, another YouTube friend of mine, made a whole video about this one joke and what it and other proverbs reveal about Sumerian culture, which is good because I want to shout out some other cultures in this video too. Let's look at the original Italians. No, I said the original Italians. Perfection. The Etruscans were a people who lived in the north of Italy, a region we now know non-coincidentally as Tuscany, when Rome was but another Latin-speaking city-state among many. Indeed, the Etruscan city-states would heavily influence a young Rome in terms of art, innovations, architecture, and forms of government. The Etruscans worshipped a pantheon of gods similar to the Greek and Roman pantheons. Yes, the Greeks and Romans worshipped different pantheons, just very similar ones with a common ancestor. Though the Etruscan gods were decidedly more reasonable than their more famous Greek and Roman counterparts. In place of Zeus or Jupiter, they had Tinia, who could actually throw 3 different types of lightning bolt, but for 2 of those he needed permission from a council of other gods. Mars/Ares also had Laran, Juno and Hera had Uni, and many legendary figures also made it into the canon, like the demigod Hercules or Heracles, whom the Etruscans called Hercle. And yet, despite their outward similarities to the Greeks and Romans, the Etruscans, or at least their language, were related to neither, as the Etruscan language belonged to a family that predated the spread of the Indo-European languages into the area, a family known to linguists as Tersenian. In fact, the Etruscans didn't even call themselves Etruscans, but Rasina. But if you want to learn more about the language in particular, I made a whole other video about that a few years ago, so I won't repeat myself here. One common artifact left behind by the Etruscans are these hut urns, shaped like little houses for once cremated remains. Now, even if this is a semi-stylized depiction of a typical Etruscan house, I mean, does your house look like a clip art image? These still give us a glimpse into what their non-stone built, as in non-surviving, structures would have been built out of, and how they would have been shaped. Paintings and frescoes also show us what Etruscan dinner parties would have been like, even leaving behind full banquet sets, overall showing an incredibly rich and prosperous Iron Age society. The Etruscan city-states were organized in a manner similar to the Greek and Latin city-states of the era, or indeed most civilizations of the time, with cities like Veii, Tarquinia, Arretium, Perusia, and several others forming a confederation of sorts. This confederation's influence spanned from the Po River to Campania and over to Corsica, and was known to the other stewards of the Italian peninsula as the Dodecapolis, or the 12 cities, though this roster wasn't fixed and didn't actually have to number 12 cities. Just as the Etruscans preceded Rome, so too did the Minoans precede ancient Greece. Well, not really, but let me be poetic here. The Minoans were a people from the island of Crete, who flourished during the Bronze Age, leaving behind majestic sites like Knossos and Phaistos. These palaces were massive compounds. With flat roofs, open courtyards, and ample parking, these structures were gradually expanded, with new halls and chambers tacked on throughout the centuries. The Minoan civilization, named after the mythical Cnossan king Minos, and not to be confused with the Mycenaeans of mainland Greece, was organized in what is known as a palace economy, basically an economy where workers contributed their goods to the palace, where they could then be exchanged for other goods and services. One noteworthy tenet of Minoan culture was the status of women, which on the whole was a lot better than most other historical societies. Paintings show women in what appear to be positions of wealth and authority, wearing elaborate colorful robes, in contrast to Minoan men in their simple kilts and loincloths, and who are never shown seated. Combine that with the worship of a snake goddess, and it's easy to assume that surely they must have been a matriarchy of some kind. As interesting as that idea may be, the truth is more likely not that far across the spectrum, and many of the original arguments for this are shaky at best. It's hard to verify all this for sure though, as the Minoans are an eerily silent culture. Not because they never wrote stuff down, they most certainly did, but because their writing system, known to us by the scientific term Linear A, still remains undeciphered. But even if we can't yet know what their language is like, what they joked about, or even what they actually called themselves, the Minoans did leave behind plenty of famous murals showing what their culture valued. One thing we see time and time again in Minoan artwork are bulls, whether in the form of statues, idols, or paintings of people leaping over them in a way that suggests they did it enough times to actually get good at such a stunt. And they established a robust and far-reaching series of trade networks, massively influencing the Mycenaean civilization that would one day give rise to the ancient Greek civilization, and even in Egypt, paintings show foreign dignitaries from a land they call Keftu, which kind of sounds like Crete, or at least the Greek Kriti, doesn't it? So those are just 3 cultures of over a dozen potential ideas I had, especially those suggested by members of the KhAnubis Discord server, but I have to end the video somewhere. If this video does well enough though, I'll look into making another video like this about some more ancient cultures. If you think I should continue this series, give this video a like to let me know, and subscribe to see that video in the future.